If you're looking to try to buy land in the state of Texas that has Ag Exemption, or you're trying to apply it for Ag Exemption, this is a video to watch. We're going to go through some hints and also how-tos to get your Ag Exemption. Now, a stupid question of the day is, why would you want to have Ag Exemption on your property? There's multiple reasons. Obviously, the first one is to lower your property taxes on your land, or it could be recreational land, it could be your hunting property, or it could be various other types of properties. The other thing too is it increases the value of your property, because lots of buyers do not want to be in production of agriculture. They just want to have recreational land. And number three, there is also sales tax benefits to have an Ag Exemption or a production off your property. So let's first talk about land that does not have Ag Exemption. What is the process to get that Ag Exemption? Well, number one, every county in the state of Texas is different related to minimum acreage. So you're going to have to call the county appraiser district and apply for Ag. And once you apply, you have to basically prove that you're producing some type of good to basically go ahead and send it to market for human consumption. Now, that could be an array of different things, from bees to cattle to crops, to all sorts of different livestock, goats and so forth. And on top of that, you're going to have to be producing goods for human consumption 5 out of 7 years, meaning that you own the property for 7 years and you've been producing goods for human consumption for 5 years. Now, let's say you buy a property that is Ag exempt. Is that Ag exemption transferable? Well, yes, it is. But you have to go through a certain process when you buy that property. Number one, you got to go ahead and go to the county appraiser district and reapply for the Ag Exemption. And let's say you have a lease on that property, or a cattle lease from the previous owner. You need to transfer that over to your ownership with the lease agreement. And that will continue your Ag Exemption. Now, a lot of people get caught because they do not reapply for the Ag Exemption, and the county appraiser district will go ahead and strip that Ag Exemption off your property, which I've seen many times, as soon as possible. Make sure you do this every single time. Let's go through another example. Landowner has exotic animals, has a high fence property, and uses it for hunting. Is that going to be Ag exempt? No. The reason why is hunting is recreational activity. Now, in order to get those animals to become Ag exempt, that individual is going to have to somehow slaughter those animals and send them to market for human consumption. See the difference? Human consumption versus use. Now, here's a tip that most people do not talk about, is that you can lease out your property for range management, or cattle, from your neighbor or from another person that can lease your property. And if you have a lease agreement in place, you can, whatever they're producing off your property, you can use that to apply for your Ag. And that makes the process a lot easier and less costly for you, because in most cases, many of the landowners out in Texas or wherever do not live full-time on their property. So it's very hard for them to get Ag. Now, another side note of Ag exemption, many counties, all the counties are going to require a certain amount of AU, or animal units per acre basis. So for instance, for cattle, they might require that you have a minimum of 4 cows and 1 bull. For horses, if you're not having a breeding operation, it's not going to count as Ag. You have to be producing a good. Everything goes back to AU on Ag exemptions. Now, to get around to some, let's say you have 5 acres. Yeah, you can do bees, but the key here is to understand that your neighbors are people that you can use. Now, the other benefit of having Ag exempt property, besides the property taxes being substantially lower, is to have a benefit called the sales tax exemption, which basically means that you can apply to this Texas comptroller to have all sales tax exemptions for anything that you buy for your property for production, meaning tractors or anything that supports production of those goods that you're producing off your property. Obviously, that could be very substantial at 6.25% base, all the way up to 8.25. Now, finally, we're going to talk about wildlife exemption. So you have Ag exemption that you start out with your property, you have to have it for 5 years before you become ag. Well, then what you can do is convert it to wildlife exemption or valuation. They call it, some people call it valuation, but most people understand is wildlife exemption or ag exemption. Now, wildlife is totally different. Oh, there goes the feeder right there. We're going to talk about feeders and all that stuff in just a second. But wildlife exemption is basically not being in production for ag goods, and you're just managing the wildlife on your property. Now, the first caveat to wildlife exemption, you have to be ag exempt first. Then you convert it to wildlife exemption. Now, why would you want to become wildlife exempt? Well, many owners, like I said, are recreational owners. They do not want to be managing livestock or any type of goods off their property, or they don't want to lease out their property for cattle. There's just, cons and pros to everything. And you still can benefit from an ag exemption while managing wildlife, which some people are already doing, and have that substantial lowering of your property taxes. Now, the only caveat to this is that you cannot apply to a sales tax exemption if you're running wildlife management on your property. On wildlife management, there is a certain amount of minimum acreage also. So it's different than ag. You're going to have to call the cattle breeders district to see what the minimum acreage for wildlife management is. It is easier to manage. There's pros and cons to both types of exemptions. But the most important thing is to have one of them, because it would massively devalue your property if you lose it or you don't have it. Now, the other wildlife management requirements are the following. Number one, in order to apply for wildlife management, you have to be ag exempt first, and you have to turn in the wildlife management plan that is provided by the state of Texas. And you have to at least have 3 out of the 7 requirements to become wildlife. So, for example, some of my properties have feed supplementation, which would be like protein feed, hay. Corn doesn't usually work. Most counties will not allow it. Then water supplementation, obviously giving the wildlife water. And brush control could be one, or varmint control could be another. There's also habitat, and there's one more. I do the minimum of 3, usually water supplementation, feed supplementation, and also varmint control, because I'm already killing, or harvesting pigs at any given time. One thing that's really interesting about predator control or varmint control is that you can use it for raccoons, porcupines, even fire ants. Now, in wildlife management, there's other categories that you can use. You don't necessarily have to hunt. You can do game counts. You can also do all sorts of stuff. And what I see a lot is wildlife management is assume that you can use it for exotic game, and it's not true. You can only use wildlife management for native game and native wildlife. So now, the other requirement related to wildlife management is that you have to turn in an annual report once a year. Unlike ag exemption, where you just go ahead and do the application, they approve it, and then you're ready to go. On wildlife management, you have to turn in a report once a year to give an update on that wildlife plan. And some counties require you just to fill out the form and turn it in. Some of the other counties require you to take pictures, have receipts related to your feed supplementation. So I'll go ahead and advise to, basically go ahead and fill out the form, keep pictures of what you have done in the year and what you have, and keep receipts just in case the county requires that. Now, this is a general overview. Obviously, we do this all the time with our clients related to consulting for wildlife management and ag exemption. One big thing that really just hurts me to see landowners buying property and not knowing this process when they buy a property and the agent or the owner, the previous owner, did not tell them that they have to do these steps to keep the ag exemption, and their property taxes go up thousands and thousands of dollars, especially near municipalities like Austin, let's say, or other areas. So the more you know about this, the better. And if you have any questions, always reach out. We can answer them. But this is a simple process. It's not too complicated. Always by default, call the county appraisal district. They're going to try to help you as much as possible to get that ag or transfer the ag over, or become wildlife management exemption also.